So, for tonight's message, the message is about probably one of the most intrinsic things in Christianity, and it's about forgiveness. Now, I could pull up a mess of different scriptures. I mean, if you open the Bible and throw a rock at it, you'll probably hit a verse talking about either repentance or forgiveness, because they're everywhere. And the thing about it is that, like, just to even be specific, we could look at Matthew 5, where Jesus talks about, or Matthew 6, where Jesus talks about how if you have your sacrifice on the altar and you're ready to ask God for whatever, run to your brother who you have unforgiveness towards and ask and forgive him, or ask for forgiveness, or whatever, whoever you're bitter against. And even further, and later on when he talks to, I believe it was Peter, who asks, how many times should we forgive? And Jesus says 70 times 70. Just basically this point that we should just be continuously forgiving people. And even if you want to move away from Jesus, the entire book of Leviticus is nothing but sacrificial rituals in the Old Testament for people asking for forgiveness. It's everywhere. And the reason for that is because the truth is that you can't really live in this very broken and messed up world without forgiving people. You can try. It's great. You get to feed into a deepening sense of bitterness and pride that moves you forward and makes you become actually the people who you are so bitter and frustrated with. So if you want to perpetuate a cycle that's already in existence, you got it. Don't forgive a soul. Keep every single one of their crimes against you and use them as armor. And when you do, you'll get to become just like them. And I don't say that because it's anything other than a fact of life that you can see over and over and over again. Everybody thinks that if they don't forgive and they protect themselves, they'll be happy. I don't know how many of you guys have ever met people who are in survival mode, but nobody's happy in survival mode. In basic training, they put you in survival mode. That's the entire time. You know who's happy in basic training? Nobody. Nobody. When people get lost in the wilderness and they have to try to find their way home, do you know how happy they are? Like the excitement levels that they go through? None. People on the battlefield, it doesn't matter. Whatever situation you want to look at, you see people who are in a situation where they have to defend themselves and protect themselves from danger. You can apply this to a broad swath of different situations, and it's all the same thing. They're not happy. Having to defend yourself against pain, against anger, against harm in any way, shape, or form does not make you a happier, better, or stronger person. All that it does is puts you in a situation where you're going to be continuously defending yourself. You can feel strong when you've pushed somebody back, when you've defended yourself, but it doesn't make you stronger. See, even when you talk about like working out and exercise, the thing that comes down to it is, what is the part, when you go and work out, what is the part that actually allows you to get stronger? Is it the workout itself, or is it the rest period afterwards, where your muscles are allowed to rest and rejuvenate? Well, it's the rest period. Anybody with a basic knowledge of exercise and working out in any way, shape, or form knows that that's the truth. So if you're putting yourself in a constant situation that is effectively survival mode, one way or the other, you're just going to keep exercising those same muscles. What happens when you exercise muscles over and over and over again without rest? They strain and they break. You get tendon tears, you get different things like that. And the thing of it is that with that in mind, it's something to always end up looking at. You know, what am I actually benefiting from continuing on the way that I am? Yeah, I feel like I'm protecting myself, but am I surviving or am I thriving? And there's an important distinction there. To survive is to simply avoid death or pain or anger, you know, whatever it is that you're afraid of or that you're running from or that's going to destroy you. To thrive is to exist in a state of growth and development. And the funny thing about it is that a lot of us, see, a lot of the people in this world, they live in a constant state of surviving. It's all most of us are capable of doing. I mean, we look with shock and amazement at the people who are actually thriving. There was a TED Talk I was watching a while ago, and the woman in it was talking about how she was a identity counselor, I think it was. But she talked about how when you see people who are being fully themselves, they're described as being larger than life. And it's a funny thing because you can't be larger than life if all you're doing is trying to survive this life. See, when you end up surviving, you become a slave to life and to circumstance. And no amount of bitterness, anger, pride, you know, the emotions that we tend to use to cope with that situation, no amount of that's going to save you. It's not going to get you ahead. Instead, you're just going to sit constantly in a reactionary state. Your shield's going to be up, and you're going to be waiting for that strike to fall. And yeah, you might deflect it. But it doesn't mean that you're doing anything in the meantime other than waiting for the next strike. So, in a lot of ways, this ends up being our lives when we live in this state of not being willing to forgive. Just to make it clear why I say you can't actually live a life or go anywhere if you're not willing to forgive people. And the truth of the matter is that forgiveness in and of itself is already hard enough. To add reasons why you shouldn't is just to make something that's already difficult so very much more difficult than it needs to be. Because the truth is that when we look at the people around us who have hurt us, the people in our lives, the people in our pasts, who have caused us one part of pain or another, it's already hard enough to look at the hurt that they've caused us and to say, you know what? I'm going to release you from that. Even though it hurt, even though it was wrong, I'm still going to release you. Number one, that takes a lot of strength to say that to somebody else because it's so much easier to be bitter. I mean, if you think about it, what's easier? Honestly, I want you each to think of somebody who has hurt you in the last 5 years, in the last year even. One person who's hurt you. And if they were to be standing in front of you right now, focus. Anyway, if they were to be standing before you right now in this moment, and you were to tell them everything that they did to hurt you, and their response was to say, get over it. How are you going to handle that? Is it easier for you to say, okay, that's wrong, but I'm going to release you from that even though you're wrong? Or is it going to be way easier to get really pissed off and want to yell at them, scream at them, fight with them, hold on to that unforgiveness and that anger and walk away? Or kick their ass, whatever comes first.
Or their hair.
Hair, sure. I personally like to go for the eyes.
Okay.
It's a strategic thing.
Fucking right.
So, all of that said, it takes a lot of strength to actually forgive somebody, to actually release them from what they've done to you. And on top of that, as if that wasn't enough, it takes time and decisions and so many different things to actually get past the hurt. It's one of those things, and especially on the scale from like minor inconvenience to deep-seated, mind-breaking trauma, there's a pretty significant little dark rainbow there that exists between those two lines. And it's all covered in this. And the closer you get to that more painful side, the longer it's going to take to overcome, to be free of that pain, to heal. So, the thing of it is that, this week, what I've been kind of like facing is my own unforgiveness. Because there's plenty. I think I talked last week about God taking me down a merry little journey of looking at the people that, people that I still had unforgiveness for. Whether it was my ex-girlfriend and her stepdad and mom, or my brother and sister-in-law. But the reality is that, it goes a lot further than that. Even just to share my side of things and what God's been pulling up and making me stare at. Because the truth is that I talked about last week I talked during the True Self message about how losing it.
True Self about trying to help jog things.
Yeah, no.
I got you.
You got me. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. And it's gone.
It'll come back.
But I'll just move on to the point that I'm getting to. The thing of it is that what he's been bringing up over and over and over again are different things where unforgiveness exists in my heart and soul, and especially where pride specifically and bitterness specifically are what I've kind of gravitated towards as not only a defense mechanism, but more than anything, it's a great defense mechanism, by the way, because in both of those work together really, really well. See, the more bitter you are, the more that you know that somebody hurt you, and the more that somebody did something wrong. And the more proud you are, the less you have to look at yourself. And the more that you can turn that mirror and point it at the world around you and say they're wrong. See, and bitterness kind of gives you that evidence to feed into that. And one thing that I had to face this week was how much I actually do that. Because the truth of the matter is that when I've spent the last 10 years almost working in the church in some capacity. And when I first came to God, and when I first had God start talking to me, that was a world-shaking experience, as one would suspect it would be. And from that point forward, it's been this kind of thing where I've just wanted to go out and do things to go help other people see. Because when you realize something's true, you spend a lot of time around people. Most of my time in school and whatnot was around the scientific community because I was wanting to go be a zoologist, and then in college it was around the scientific community, wanting to be a zoologist. You'd be shocked how many people wanting to be zoologists don't actually believe in God. It's a shocking number or something. But the point is that when you're all of a sudden, when you spend all of your time developing in a place where everything is about physical evidence, your perception dictates reality. And what's more than that, it's shared perception. Everybody has to be able to see it, hear it, and feel it in order for it to be real. Otherwise, it's a one-off thing, it's maybe there was a variable that was off in the experiment or in the situation that changed things. So when I start having God talk to me and start seeing all this crazy stuff happen, naturally my inclination is to want everybody to experience that. Because it's just like, oh, hey guys, look, God's real, man. So let's see if everybody else can have it too. Now, in the midst of that, that's been, I think technically 7 years, 8 years, something like that, that I've been working for that to some extent or another. And in all of that, I could say that in all of that, my intention has been to help bring other people to a place where they can know him. And a lot of that time has ended up instead being spent, proving in some way or another that I am who I say I am, and that I do hear from who I say I hear from. Because most Christians are relegated to believing that if somebody comes saying they're hearing from God, number one, you should be extremely cautious of that person, and number two, they're probably hearing from demons. So, first you have to get over that hurdle. So that was fun with the church. Whereas most non-believers, and many believers as well, if you come to them saying, hey, I heard a thing from God, they chalk you up as insane, pretty much. You're hearing voices, you're crazy, you probably need psychological help. Right. Are you sure that's not just yourself saying that? I don't know what this word means. Do you? No? Let's get a dictionary. The thing of it is that it's been a lot of that. And as if that resistance wasn't enough, then finally when you get over those hurdles and you're facing, and it's like, okay, maybe I can accept that this guy is what he says he is, and maybe he is actually hearing from God. Do you want to hear from God too? Sure. And it becomes yet another fight. Because then you have to deal with people, because then you deal with the side of it where people turn around and will fight every single thing. You'd think that, being somebody who, you'd think that hearing words from God would be enough. God sees into their souls, right? So you go up and share things that come from deep inside their souls, and they're just like, holy crap, how'd you know that? Well, because God told me. You believe in God, right? I do. That's crazy. I didn't know he could do that. Okay, cool. Then the next time you show up with something, oh, you're wrong. Am I wrong? No, but I don't like you anyway, so blah, blah, blah. So it's been this kind of consistent state of conflict after conflict after conflict. And as if that wasn't enough, then you find yourself in the boat of watching the people who, even though you're shouting, you might even, whether it's wisdom or words from God or anything in between that scale of possibilities, you've got people saying, basically ignoring everything that you have to say, despite the fact that they've got a sucking chest wound, and you've got the bandages to take care of it, and they won't let you help. And that's effectively what life has looked like for a very long time. And not letting you help is the nice time. Other times they pull a gun and shoot you, giving you a sucking chest wound as in response to your efforts to aid them. That has been my life for approximately 7 or 8 years, depending on when you scale it. So, having collected a fair number of sucking chest wounds, shall we say, I have a lot of anger and a lot of bitterness towards the church at large, and towards the people in the church. And I always find myself in this frustrating state of wanting to give up on them and knowing that I can't. Because who I am and how I'm built, I literally cannot walk away, no matter how much I want to. I can't help myself. I see somebody who's hurt, who needs guidance, who needs whatever, and I have to. It's who I am. Even if I try, I can't help it. I've literally been at the door walking out the door and then had to turn around and be like, this is what the thing is. Which is frustrating when you want to give up on something that you feel is pointless and futile. Because the truth is that I have come to see helping the church as an exercise in futility. And as a result of that, I've become very, very bitter towards God, even as I've projected so much of the church's activities and the people in the church's activities onto him. So I've got people being terrible, selfish, arrogant, pushy, whatever, and I'm looking at God and saying, why do you keep sending me to these people? All they're going to do is the same stupid stuff. You've literally given me words where you've said, hey, go share this word with them, but I'm telling you they're not going to listen. Then why am I sharing it? What's the point? It's so they have an opportunity to choose, but you know they're going to make the wrong choice. Yes, but it's so they have the opportunity. It's important for them to have the chance to make a choice. Okay. 5 angry Facebook messages later from them. And it's just like, okay, well, they took a few good stabs in there. Some of those actually hurt. And even beyond that, there have been plenty of situations where, God's called me into things. Where it's been, there was one church group that I was part of for a long time here. 2-3 years, something like that. It was run by a former friend of mine. And essentially the way it played out was that when I first went to his group, like, he and I had a sit-down talk, and he explained all this stuff about wanting to be there for me, be community, and be a friend, and just be a brother, and so many different things. And the thing of it was that God told me right then and there that this guy was going to betray me. That at some point in the future, he was going to turn his back on me. Now, this isn't something that, like, I held on to and, waited for. No, I told him directly to his face. I was just like, this is what God just told me. You believe everything that you're saying right now. You fully intend to do everything that you're saying. But you are going to do this. I would never do that. Well, this is what God's telling me. You can fight it all you want, but it's what I heard. So do with that as you will. A few years later, we get one of his pastors decides to start screwing one of the congregation, and then Heather and I happened to get together at that time, so we got to carry the weight of that decision. Because they decided to forgive that pastor.
Not carry, catch that fire. Everybody had a
Whichever analogy you want to use, whatever. Either way, it ends up with us being covered in a mountain of garbage.
Yeah.
Whether it's on fire or not is open to your interpretation. Yeah.
And those rats.
They were rats too. There were legitimately rats. Anyway, the point is that, in the midst, right before all of that, God had given me words about, just being more committed to this group and actually surrendering myself in a lot of ways. Because I had been existing in this in a state of, okay, I know they're going to do this thing. So I'm going to shield myself and guard myself from that inevitability until God's just like, I want you to be fully involved with them. I want you to drop your shields and be vulnerable. But you know that they're going to do this. Yes, I know, but this is what I need you to do. Okay. So I did. And it wasn't long after that they did in fact end up doing that exact thing. Heather and I got together. It became this incredible fire war of just gossip and garbage and betrayal after betrayal after betrayal until finally God told us we could leave, and we left. And then the betrayals continued even after that. So, in the face of that, there's naturally this feeling that I've had carried forward of, okay, God, You put me in this situation. You said surrender yourself. You said be vulnerable. No, but you also warned me that they were going to do these things. And the thing of it was that he's never been quiet about it. It's never been something left in a vacuum. He's always been clear that they had choices they could make. They were supposed to be everything that they said they were going to be. And even if that one leader had decided to be treacherous, it didn't have to be the whole church. Anybody could have looked at that and realized that this probably wasn't the way forward for anybody at all. But they were doing it anyways. So, in that particular instance, as one example, and there are many, where my issues with the people have ended up being blamed on God. In the sense that, yeah, he said, commit yourself to these people, but he also had been the one warning me about them. So it's not like he was trying to just like throw me under the bus, you know. But at the same time, my anger at them has been projected onto him. So last week when I was talking about forgiving God, I kept talking about that a lot, and about how that ends up becoming a big thing. Sometimes we have to do that because this happens. I can look at it and honestly say that I am projecting my anger at these people onto Jesus, even though I'm aware of the fact that he didn't do this. It wasn't his fault. He didn't tell them, hey, go betray Nathan. Hey, go betray Heather. Hey, treat them like garbage, do all these terrible things, gossip about them. Jesus didn't do that, but they did. They made those decisions. They made those choices. It was all them. And they carry the full responsibility of that. That was well timed. Anyway, they carry the full weight of responsibility for that on their own shoulders because they made those choices. However, feelings are a problem because that's what they do, is they can misalign things and change things up, so you're blaming somebody else for somebody else's crimes. It happens. The psychological term is projection, and it's pretty common. In first year psychology, you'll probably hear about it over and over and over again because it's one of the things that makes it really difficult for people to express their emotions and direct them to where they actually belong. People get angry and hurt, and then they'll place the responsibility on any number of other people other than the cause of that blame or of that hurt. Whether they put it on themselves, or they put it on somebody else, or oftentimes they'll just put it on somebody who reminds them of that person. A lot of relationships go bad because boyfriend gets dumped by girlfriend A, gets together with girlfriend B, and begins projecting all the problems from girlfriend A onto girlfriend B, and it works the other way around all the time. It's not something, nobody sets out to do it. It's not like we think to ourselves, oh, I'm going to get a new girlfriend, new boyfriend. I'm going to find this new friend who reminds me of that ex or that former friend just so I can punish them.
Oh man, scary.
Usually we don't do that. So, all of that said, this is what I've been having to kind of face and acknowledge, is just the number of people that
And he had the one prior, which was
Have bitterness.
sometime in 2017.
bitterness towards, yeah.
Right.
Bitterness towards, and then also pride about that bitterness. Because again, like I said, it's really great. You just, if you can grab onto pride and in the midst of your bitterness, then you can give yourself all the reasons in the world to never look at what you did or anything else and why you're right. Why you're right to be as angry as you are, as hurt as you are, and why you're entitled to to justice. Now, to give a very clear perspective on this, specifically, when we talk about Christianity and we talk about kind of the way the world is, there's something that we kind of have to navigate. See, we talk about survival because because the world has this thing called death in it that everyone's afraid of. And see, everyone's trying to live the best life they can, whatever that looks like, before they die. Whether they want to live a life where they're remembered, or they want to live a life where they're content or comfortable or whatever, we just kind of adjust our existence based off of the inevitability that we're trying not to acknowledge is coming for each and every one of us. And see, the thing about Christianity is that when we look at the perspective there, death is a part of the natural world as it is. Even if we can look back at the story of the Garden of Eden and see that God didn't intend for death to be part of this world. It wasn't something that was well understood by Adam. But see, the thing that happens is that, with the first sin, is that a choice was made and a world was changed and altered because of that choice. So suddenly death became a part of this world. Now, the important thing to look at here is this, is that as a result of that decision, we all now live in this world. Everybody has it. And we can all jump up and say, I didn't make that choice. Well, that's fine, but somebody else did. And the essential story here that we end up having to look at when we look at this world and the way that it is, the world is the way it is because somebody made a choice before you. Your life, your childhood, is the way it was because somebody made a choice. As a child, you don't make a lot of decisions about where you're going to go or what you're going to do. Instead, you end up reaping the consequences of the decisions of your mother and father. It's why psychology has so many counselors that make so much money and doing their job, because everybody has had to deal with the repercussions of the choices made by their parents. And if it's not your parents, it's whoever else is guarding you, being your guardian. Somebody somewhere will hurt you, and when they hurt you, you end up having to carry that pain because they made a decision. Even though you didn't make that choice, you didn't say, hey, I want you to betray me. Hey, Mom, I want you to, treat me like garbage for most of my childhood. Keep me at a distance so that I don't understand what intimacy is. And then now I'm supposed to have a loving relationship with a wife or husband or what have you, and I don't know how to do that. You didn't make that choice, but because somebody else made it and you're living with it, it's yours, it's there. And this ends up being the truth that ends up being such a thing in the, biblically, that we run into, is that it's people making choices, oftentimes bad, and then other people having to deal with them. And that's been a thing. So we can look all the way back and say, well, I didn't choose that. It doesn't matter. I didn't choose to bring sin into the world. And a lot of apologists will make the argument that, well, you would though. That's not necessarily true. What is true is that you were born later on in a world that's already had that decision made. And the longer that you keep trying to fight with that, the harder it's going to be for you to live in that world. The only thing that you can be accountable for is the choices that you make. And that's important when we talk about forgiveness, because you are responsible for the decision to forgive or not to forgive. That is something that is put in squarely into your hands and is under your power to decide. The world is a mess. You can either choose to add to that mess or not. You can choose to change parts of the world around you to try to make that less of a mess, or not. Like, there are a lot of decisions that we have, and there's a lot of power put on our hands as far as how we're going to move forward in life. And again, I'll make the point that, you know, when you choose the route of unforgiveness, when you choose to be justified in the face of, you know, people who did you wrong, when you choose pride, when you choose bitterness, when you choose those things, all you're really doing is putting yourself in the same pool as everyone else. Because a lot of the people that made those decisions out of those same things. When I think back to my mom, for example, and a lot of the decisions she made when I was a child, she made a lot of those decisions out of pride. Either because she always wanted to be right, and whether she hurt me directly, or my brother, or hurt us incidentally because she made a decision for our family, and as a result, everything went bad, she still did these things based on the idea that she needed to be right about what she was doing, and she would ignore any counsel whatsoever that told her this might be a bad idea in order to have it. Or even if she was wrong. Dear heavens, the response that anybody got when they told her she was wrong. My mom's a sweet old lady now, but when she was in her 30s and 40s, she was a tyrant. And that's the thing, is that she made these decisions because pride was more important. She needed to be right. She needed that defense mechanism more than she needed to change, more than she was willing to. And she felt she was justified because of so many different reasons and so many pieces of evidence that she held together and held up as a cause for her to continue on this path. And I would love to say that I've always been the complete opposite, that I've learned from my mom's mistakes, but in reality, when I'm honest with myself, I find that I actually haven't. And many times over, I've had to acknowledge that, yeah, I'm actually being a pretty prideful person right now. And the thing is, I have no patience for other people who are proud. Like, when I find myself faced with that, I oftentimes, especially when it's like in conflict and conflict's created because of their pride, I just lose my crap. The urge to strangle somebody immediately just comes out, and I kind of maybe go too far sometimes in being mean to them. But the point is that the irony of that is where my own pride is its own thing. So, and even that comes in because I'm justified in some way in my mind. So we either perpetuate a cycle or we move away from it, and the decision ends up being ours in all times, in all situations. And I'll ask, do you guys want to take a break, or do you want me to just finish this message?
You can finish it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Surprise me.
Okay. So, I'll just finish it. The thing of it is that the reason why we talk about forgiveness and why this ends up being so invaluable, like I said earlier, you can't really live in this world without forgiving people. You'll end up alone, which is already bad for human beings. And the thing of it is, you'll find some people where they just cycle through people groups, and I'm speaking in generalities is always tricky because you have a lot of different avenues, and we could go into the different avenues of how people navigate this world by specifically revolving around the subject of forgiving and not forgiving the people around them. But it's messy and complicated, and just to spare us that long explanation, there are a lot of different ways that people handle this. And there are ways to move forward in life in a sense by never forgiving anybody, but that moving forward, progress isn't always good. You can make progress off the edge of a cliff, And even then, you're making progress towards the ground until you finally hit it. Progress alone isn't actually a way to dictate success or benefit, even. The thing of it is that
Oh my god.
She's coming this way.
Just going for Jen.
okay. Anyway,
Your fans are here. Damn it.
Surprise.
it's true. They made it. Anyway,
Hey guys, how's it going?
Awesome.
so
He didn't give one autograph. They're gonna keep doing it until you do it.
I'm on it.
So, on the subject of forgiveness, and the value of it, we don't oftentimes feel the value of it. In fact, I would say most times we don't. Most times it doesn't feel like being the bigger person to forgive somebody for something that they did wrong. It usually feels better in terms of, it's more satisfying to get revenge. But see, the thing of it is that's a transactional mindset, because it's only looking at things on the short term. What happens with a lot of people when they do get revenge, or when they avenge themselves, is they find that, number one, oftentimes the problem doesn't actually go away. The hurt's already there. Hurting somebody else as response actually doesn't really change anything. It just means that there are two people hurt now as opposed to one. And I say that from my own experience. When I was 19, 20 years old, I would have totally scoffed at this idea. Now at 33, I've only found it to be very, very true. Whether it was because of things that I use my mom as one example. She's one who I've definitely gotten my revenge on at different times, my early years. But by that same token, it didn't make any of the problems go away. They were still there. Some are still there now, even though there have been years of opportunities to forgive and to change and to heal and all those different things. It's a slow process. 18 years of childhood, so many years of adulthood, I'm not quite there yet. But the thing of it is that, I've ended up having to learn that firsthand. That just because you turn around, and even though you might express that anger and those feelings, you might vent that. There are other ways to do that. You don't have to tear the other person a new one. Let me rephrase that. Sometimes it's actually beneficial to tear the other person a new one. What I mean is that it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to actually hurt them to justify yourself. The eye for an eye thing isn't real. There's a reason why when Jesus came back, he just kind of dismissed that. Or when Jesus came, I should say. So, but no, it doesn't matter, because a lot of us live that way anyways. Or at least we feel that way. But the thing of it is that where you find yourself when you forgive people is, one, there's a decision to make. And it's the decision of whether or not you're going to cling to this or not. And see, in that token, you do become a slave to the pain if you choose not to forgive them, because it's going to be on you. The more you hold on to it, the longer that you continue in this place, you might if you're lucky, you might end up numbing yourself to the feelings. But people who are numb to their feelings are dangerous. That's definably how psychopaths work. Is that they're numb to a significant number of their feelings. Disassociation is a real thing, and it can be actually super destructive. What a shock. But we develop all these different coping mechanisms, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, and so much of it can be so easily avoided by making that decision to forgive or to simply forgive. So it's kind of a decision that everybody gets to make, but for purposes of this message and what I was given to talk about, I'm going to talk about that for a minute. Because the thing of it is with forgiveness is that we either move forward in life towards survival or we move forward in life towards thriving in it. When you're free from the things that hurt you, you find yourself with an amazing ability to exist in this world. That's not incumbent on whether or not you need to protect yourself, but rather it's free of that mindset in general. You literally are just able to be who you are, free of that need, free of that drive, free of that kind of sword of Damocles lingering over the top of your head. You're able to just be. And it's a very liberating kind of feeling. And sometimes it's funny because a lot of people don't even know what to do with it when they do. You find yourself forgiving those who have hurt you, letting it go, and then suddenly those feelings that have compiled so much of your subconscious and your psyche are gone. And it's like you're for a loop for a moment because you don't know what to do. And you're free to do whatever you want. Go do something else with it. But the thing is that in that freedom, since we're allowed to think and allowed to move in different ways, we're allowed to go help people, work with people, do things, build, without the fear that we're going to get, hit for it or shot for it or, whatever. Essentially, you don't have to fear the inevitability of another trauma. And on top of that, you can treat people as they are, rather than projecting other people onto them. If my one friend from way back when hurt me really bad and I meet this new friend, but I've forgiven that old one, it means that even though this new friend has certain things that remind me of that old friend, I can treat them as a new person. Even though the memory's there, even though the reminder's there, I can still say, okay, but this is somebody else. As opposed to that being there, that reminder being a series of red flags that make me get on the defensive.
Like you're not waiting for them to be exactly how that person is.
Exactly. You're not waiting for them to be the exact same person.
Aha, I knew it.
Yeah. It's very liberating to deal with people on a case-by-case basis, as opposed to having a backlog of red flags that you have to run everybody through to make sure that they're safe. Once the security checks are off, it's actually pretty comfortable. And yeah, the thing of it is that you'll find more people who are, jerks. And yeah, you'll put yourself out there for more people who are jerks. But the funny thing about that is it doesn't sting as bad when you don't have that backlog. Because the thing of it is that when you have that backlog of people, of hurts and pains, it actually makes you more sensitive. So you're not given the opportunity to heal. It's basically like if you're covered in cuts and you decide to roll around on a floor covered in salt, it's going to hurt really, really bad. If you're not covered in wounds and you roll around on that floor covered in salt, it's not going to be so bad. You might not even notice it. Maybe you might find that you have some tiny little cut because it got salt in it. That was a really weird analogy, but it works.
It's a good picture of how things work, though.
The point is
Whatever it is.
when you've had the opportunity to heal, you're not as sensitive to the damage that can come. So, all of that said, there's also the side of it where, you know, it affects the people around you. See, being able and willing to forgive people allows you to be able to function better in community, because once you're not projecting and guarding yourself as much, you get to just be who you are. And going back to that statement about the larger than life thing, the more a person is who they are, the more alive that person becomes, the more vibrant they are. Because again, so much of the world is locked into that place of just trying to defend itself. And that's the thing, is like, the people that we oftentimes migrate to the most, or are most afraid of because they are so starkly different to us, are the people that are happy. And the funny thing about it is when you're trying to survive, like I said earlier, you're not happy. But it's when you are able to feel loved, when you are able to feel like you're an important piece of life, when you don't have to always protect yourself. And that's not to say that you should never guard your heart or anything like that. All this is to say is that you shouldn't always have to lock yourself in the keep behind a castle to defend yourself. You can see that somebody's going to be a liar, and you can acknowledge that somebody's going to be a liar. But just because you forgave somebody that lied to you and hurt you really bad doesn't mean that you can't look at this new person and say, I know that what you're about. I see you. And I'm going to move forward with you knowing what you're about. Hey, can you trust me to do this? No, I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to trust you with that. Why not? Because you've already lied to me like 3 different times, and I was aware of it, but you did it anyways. There are plenty of ways to navigate society without always having to quietly protect yourself. And the funny thing about it is when you're not carrying a bunch of wounds, you can find yourself pretty free to do that. Suddenly the prospect of it isn't as scary. So, with all that said, there's a thing for us to look at. And that's specifically in and of ourselves. See, the thing of it is that with every one of us, we get to make a decision as to what we're going to do. And I know that there's not a single person in this room right now that doesn't have some form of unforgiveness. I had to throw mine out here and play sacrificial lamb. Yay, team. The thing is that I know that I have to deal with that, which is always kind of a fun thing, because since extroverted feeling is a thing, you know, my wife can attest to the fact that oftentimes when I hear things, I think of how they can be applied to everyone else as opposed to stopping and applying them to myself first.
What? I didn't say that.
That you also didn't disagree.
The
thing
led you to the understanding.
whatever. It was through substantial amounts of frustration. In every instance we get to do that, we get to make a decision as to what we're going to do with the things that have happened to us. We can hide it, we can bury it, we can pretend it's not there, we can protect ourselves, we can do a plethora of different things. It doesn't matter. Because basically what it all boils down to is this. is, are you going to forgive or not? If you are, that's a process in and of itself. And if you are not, fine. That's fine. You'll inevitably come back to this road over and over and over again. Because especially for people who know God, he tends to do that a lot, where he'll just bring you back over and over and over again to make the decision of whether you want to forgive or not. And you can do whatever you want with it. Again, choice. Just as those people from my little story there bore the full responsibility for their decisions, we each bear the full responsibility for all of our decisions. We can blame it on whoever we want. It doesn't mean anything. I can blame anything in the world I want to on my mom. It doesn't make me right. In fact, it actually makes me more wrong to be lying to myself and everyone around me about her.
Oh, I hope I did.
So, that's the thing. And the other part about this, talking about forgiveness, one specific and very important thing is that forgiving people doesn't mean just letting it all off the hook. It doesn't mean pretending like it's better than it was. It doesn't mean ignoring how you feel or any of those kinds of things. The decision to forgive, there's a book that Heather and I were reading together, and he put it very, very well in saying that when you forgive, you are looking at the situation, acknowledging it for everything that it is, and you're saying, it hurt, it was wrong, and I release you. At no point do you try to pretend it was less. At no point do you try to ignore what your feelings were, that they didn't, and say they didn't matter. At every point, you acknowledge everything for what it is. Was it unjust? Absolutely. Were you hurt? Absolutely. Does that matter? Yes. That does matter. Was this person wrong to do this? Of course. It would be stupid to think anything else is true. Was that, like, did you deserve that? No, absolutely not. Unless you did. I mean, that happens. I mean, if you go into a bar, make fun of everybody, and then get punched by the one guy that stands up and does something, well, you kind of did ask for it. But if you walk into the bar and somebody comes in and does that to you, makes fun of you, punches you, when you were just innocently enjoying your drink, they're wrong. And you have no part of that.
Can you say it again, like it hurt or it mattered? It hurt? I forget.
Release you.
It, I release you. It hurt.
Yeah.
It was wrong,
Yeah.
and I release you. So, with that particular thing, those three things in mind, that's where I want us to stop and look at things, and that's where we're going to end it. Like, in terms of the discussion about forgiveness, that's all I got.
Okay.
But for purposes of moving forward into, like, prayer time and whatnot, at no point should you be thinking that what you went through didn't matter, because it mattered. And forgiving the people who caused it, or person, forgiving them doesn't make it matter less. All that it does is lets it go. Like, if you want justice, you can go try to get justice. If it doesn't change anything, then I suppose you're just going to have to cross this road later. And that's hoping that you don't leave in your wake a pile of bodies that have to come track you down later and try to demand justice. Because oftentimes we do perpetuate these cycles. But in those veins, those are the three things to look at. What hurt, what mattered. what hurt, how much it mattered,
And then your choice.
What was-
Just for you. Or to release.
what was wrong, how much that mattered, and then the decision of whether or not to release. And just because you don't feel like you can doesn't mean that you're not. Again, the decision to release somebody is a decision.
Yeah.
I oftentimes struggle with that myself because I oftentimes don't feel like I can forgive somebody yet. Some of those people that I talk about, I'd happily punch them in the face, but
Yeah.
I've chosen to forgive them.
Right. And a decision is not the same thing as a feeling. So your feelings might not line up
Right.
with your decision at first.
Yeah,
But that's okay.
exactly. So, that's what I got.